we okay? Yeah, we look very good.
Excellent.
Excellent, excellent.
So, having decamped to the green room.
You have been the director of the Academy of Ancient Music, one of the world's leading early music ensembles since 2006. Do you treat Baroque orchestras differently than traditional orchestras such as this orchestra?
Basically, no. I mean, of course, an old instrument orchestra, historically informed orchestra, they have the training in the background, but I kind of speak to them in the same way that I speak to any orchestra. I've always tried to communicate with musicians as musicians and talk about colour, smell, rhythm, whatever it is. And often in modern orchestras, you don't have a lot of rehearsal time. So for a program, you'll have 5.5, 6 hours rehearsal. So you can't start sort of educating. You have to. I think you have to speak to. I believe in speaking to musicians as musicians and communicating on that level and bringing my experience with the music, whatever it is, on the old machines with old players and those sounds in my understanding of music. And try and communicate that to
the core of the music.
Yeah, what the music's about, what's in the music. You often don't have time to start educating it. And of course, musicians hate being educated like that. That's not what it's about. It's about getting the colours in the music and what the passions are, what the music is about. And it's actually a much faster and more efficient way of doing things, I think.
So does a traditional orchestra have less rehearsal? Is that what you're saying? So
well, it can do. I mean, if certainly going to a modern American orchestra, I've had literally 5.5 or 6 hours rehearsal to do a program.
Right. Why do you think that is? Budget.
Probably
budget.
But it's kind of enough if you don't start treating it like a schoolroom.
Okay. Yes.
And I just don't think that works anyway. I mean. Often what happens with early music conductors is they sort of come and give a list of negatives. Don't do this, don't do that, and that again, also they'll come and say, no vibrato.
Right.
And that's
it's not very inspiring.
It's not very inspiring, it's also a lie.
Yes.
By the way.
By the way. Yeah, we can vibrate, we can slide, it's a lot of fun.
It's a lie. Vibrato has always been around, always been around. And it's just been used differently from it became used in the 20th century, how it became used. It was always used as an ornament, but it was used. To negate it completely it's a lie. It's wrong.
I actually have a question now that you're speaking about this. I play in a quartet in Germany, and I've noticed since moving there that the vibrato is so different there. And then they also, even in traditional romantic repertoire, they have this non-vibrato loud sound. Do you feel like the traditional orchestras you work with, but I mean just a modern orchestra in Europe and America are different? Have you noticed that?
I guess so, although not really. I think the orchestras are louder in America, that's for sure. I heard.
Okay. Yeah.
I heard the Boston Symphony rehearsing in Symphony Hall a few weeks ago. They were doing Tchaikovsky, and it was very loud. But that's just that's one. No, I think. Not really. I think maybe the English orchestras or European orchestras have a little more contact with the early music world than the American orchestras have. Right. But as I say, that's not always necessarily a good thing because to do no vibrato in Bruckner or Ravel,
yes, but we do hear that.
It's nonsense. Yeah. It's nonsense.
It's foreign to me. It's a new sound.
It's nonsense. Yeah. And people say, "Oh, listen to the old recordings. They didn't do vibrato." That's not true. That recording of Joachim, one of the early he's doing vibrato. It's a very different kind of vibrato from the mid-20th century vibrato, or but it's there, and it because it's there. There's a sort of freedom to the mechanism. It's not this. It's not sort of being held in stasis. It just creates a really hard, ungiving kind of sound.
Okay.
That whole approach, but
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe this is kind of similar to what you've been saying. Are there fundamental differences between classical and Baroque music, or do they speak to you in the same way?
What do you mean by classical?
I mean, like anything Beethoven.
Well, music has always changed. The style of music has changed, but I think something like Monteverdi or early Italian repertoire is no less passionate or doesn't contain any less stuff than Tchaikovsky or Rachmaninoff.
But what type of passion is it? I mean,
it's a different stylized musical representation, and the forms, of course, are different. The forms that music plays around with in the classical era and the Romantic era are different. If you have a Tchaikovsky slow movement or a Rachmaninoff slow movement, it's very different from a Mozart slow movement. The form, scale, and actually, in a way, the further back you go, the more human, really human it is, because certainly 17th century music can change like we can. Our moods can change instantly from being very contented to being very distracted. And you find that kind of fast changing happening a lot more in the early music than you do from, say, a Rachmaninoff slow movement, where you'll have maybe 7 or 8 minutes of something very slow and thoughtful, and then maybe a fast middle bit, and then so that's a more.
So maybe like stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it's very different. The style of music just changes, but I always look for the same kind of human passions in any kind of music, and that's what music is.
Right,
as far as
it is human.
As far as I understand it.
Yes, I agree.
And maybe when you get to the 20th century that changes, I don't know, but that's a very different century.
Okay. I happen to know that you are the father of an adorable infant and a toddler.
I have 3, actually. I have a 19-year-old daughter as well. So
yes, I actually knew that as well.
Yes.
And how do you find balance between your work and your family? And to further that, what are the challenges you face? And can you offer any advice for other musicians who are in a similar situation?
I think you do what you need to do. I mean, every family circumstance is going to be different. You'd be more or less understanding. My wife, present wife, is a musician. She's a keyboard player, so and younger than me. So I think if you're married to a musician, generally musicians understand musicians' lives, I guess. Maybe don't always accept them. I mean, there's always maybe certain issues or conflicts in that. But I think music is. I am a music addict, as I've already said, and that is my passion. One of my great passions. And I couldn't not do it. And the balance thing, that's tricky.
Yes, the balance.
Because certainly I'm lucky that I'm booked pretty well in advance. So, but it's always a.
Do you ever feel like you're like a visitor in your own home?
No.
No. Okay.
And I think that's why it feels good, because when I do go home, I do go home.
You can enter seamlessly, or as seamlessly.
And changing diapers and stuff. That's great.
Yeah. I love it too.
It's just that's and just seeing your daughter smile for the first time. That's what that's where you go. But no, music is absolutely my great passion, and always has been, as I've said, from as long as I can remember. So I couldn't not do it. So I have to go where I'm asked to go, and I gladly go. But it's always difficult trying to make a balance, but. So far.
Yes. Okay.
And I don't sleep any more when I'm away than I do when I'm at home. So it's.
Okay. What does music mean to you as a person, and what function does it fulfill in your life? Music, well, it kind of defines me. It's what I do, but what I do is I bring it to people. I don't. It's not something I do on my own. I do it with people, whether it's chamber music or chamber orchestras or big orchestras, or teaching, which I also love. I mean, Bernstein is one of my great heroes, and he was just, he did everything, and he saw teaching and learning as the same thing. It's the same word in lots of European languages, and communication. It's about communication. What I do, is bring this incredible stuff, which means so much to me, and I think can help people. I really believe, bringing music to, and sharing it with people, and allowing people to interact with it, and that's something which is really important when I feel when giving concerts. It's not about us on stage and people sitting in the audience. You have to bring people into it, especially when it's kind of weird music like some of the stuff we're playing in this project. Yes.
You can't just not make contact and expect the audience to understand it. So I find it always very important to communicate with the audience by speaking to them from the stage, or whether it's pre-concert talks or whatever, to give them a little bit of help if it's weird music that they haven't heard before. And even if it's stuff they have heard before, maybe tell them something that they might not know about Beethoven 5 or Eine kleine Nacht music or whatever it is, if it's a really famous piece. Music must never be routine.
Right.
You must never just do a piece for the sake of doing it. There's always something to find and to communicate with an audience and bring it to life.
So in some ways it's like a scientific experiment, like it means something to you, it's a personal thing, but then when it is exposed to the elements, it changes.
Yeah, and it must be shared. It must be, and an audience should not be, I hate this idea that an audience should sit in silence and darkness. I think it's completely wrong. And it's a 20th century aberration. Audiences in the 17th, 18th century, you can just have to read Mozart's letters about when he gave the Paris Symphony. He wrote specific passages so that they would applaud during the movement. You know, it was interactive. People, they shouted, they threw things, they applauded, they booed during a movement. It wasn't, you weren't supposed to sit there and do nothing.
Yes.
It was
supposed to be interactive. It was supposed to be all of us together.
And that only changes in the 20th century again.
Okay. Interesting.
You know, you can listen to even recitals. Piano recital was a very different thing at the beginning of the 20th century. Pianists still improvised between pieces. And this idea, you sit down, you play a piece, people applaud, and you go off and come back. It was a much more fluid experience, and this improvising, connecting pieces in a recital.
You know that I've recently been totally obsessed with the 3 Schumann piano string quartets.
Oh yeah.
And then in his writings, he talks about how he thought of them as 3 together, and there actually is music between the quartets, and I've found some little bits of it.
Incredible, yeah. And
I'm so into this, and the idea to have all of his quartets in a row in an evening. Anyway.
No, I mean, the whole concert experience it's become a very sort of separated thing.
Yes.
And that's really not how it should be.
Do you think there's any hope that it could return to something
well,
that's more fluid?
I think if people allow it to be, and this first basic thing of making contact with an audience and allowing them to react and interact is so important.
What is the difference between an American audience and a British or a European audience?
I would say that my experience, I've always loved performing in America, and I think it's because it's a relatively young country. Yes. I mean, you know, there's a certain apathy or jaded quality that you can get in the European audience because they've heard it before and they know it. They know it. Whereas that's not always the case here, and so it's a sort of really wonderful naivety in a way, and in a good way.
Yes.
And I just find that American audiences will react, will come with you more in a way more easily than the European. But no, that's a big generalisation, of course. But
interesting.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed performing in America, actually.
Super. I think this is it. I was hoping to hear you play a little bit on the keyboard, but we got kicked out. But maybe I just wanted to have you play something that you love, a couple of seconds. But maybe I'll bring my phone later, and if we have time, because it would just be great for people to connect your words with.
Sure. Good.
Hey, this is great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It's so fun. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Brandenburg 3. Brandenburg 3.
Yes.
Good. What can I tell you about Brandenburg 3?